So you've seen your favourite ghost hunters on YouTube or maybe even TV and thought, that looks fun, that doesn't look scary, and decided to book your first ghost hunt. Or, like me, you've been dragged along to your first ghost hunt. But what should you do to prepare before your first ghost hunt? What should you expect to happen, and more importantly, what should you bring? In this video, I'll cover all of this and more, as well as give you a couple of points to watch out for. Hi, I'm Mike, and if you've got your K2 ready, let's find some ghosts. Chapter 1, Where to Begin. Let me start this video by saying that I've been intensely investigating the paranormal for approximately 3 years and have been to approximately 100 ghost hunts in all types of locations in this time. I've been with various different paranormal events companies, so hopefully that counts for something as far as my opinions are concerned. One of the first decisions to make when you decide to go on a ghost hunt is where to visit and what company to give your money to. To keep this unbiased, I won't go into specific companies, but there are two schools of thought here. You can go to either a local haunted location with a local paranormal events company, which will undoubtedly be cheaper, or you can go with a more established company to a more well-known paranormal location, which undoubtedly will be more expensive. For me, a location's reputation doesn't guarantee that you are going to have a more active investigation or capture more mind-blowing evidence. In some cases, in fact, it can actually be the opposite. Some of the smaller, lesser-known locations that we've investigated have actually given us some of our best activity to date. And this leads me to something to say about expectations, or lack of, that contributes to how active a night can feel. But for your first investigation, I would recommend that you opt for something local, possibly with a smaller events company. This way, if you decide that ghost hunting isn't for you because it can be incredibly boring, you haven't spent a small fortune and hours travelling to sit in a cold building all night talking to thin air. For your first ghost hunt, the only piece of equipment you should need to bring is a torch, but definitely bring some warm clothes and some comfortable shoes as well. A lot of ghost hunts take place in very old buildings with uneven floors, stairs, and on some of them you will even be going outside into what could be potentially muddy ground. And the last thing you want to do is turn up in your nicest trainers and have them ruined because you're in an old building that's dirty. It's definitely also worth bringing your own drinks and possibly some snacks. And while hot drinks and biscuits are often provided by the events companies, this may not always be the case. It's also very handy to have a drink with you, so when you're doing the investigation period of the event, you have something to hand to drink rather than having to wait for your next break to be able to have something to drink. And while some of these may seem obvious, I feel they're worth noting just in case it's something that you haven't thought about before your first investigation. One last point of note, before going on your investigation, you may want to research the history and hauntings of the location you are going to. This is entirely up to you, however, and it's not something I personally do because I like to go to a location and see what we capture and not be influenced by things that I've read previously about the history or the hauntings or anything like that. Chapter 2, Expectations. Setting the expectations for your first ghost hunting investigation could be what makes the difference between a fantastic night or an absolutely awful one. In short, try to expect as little as possible but remain optimistic that some things will happen. As stated in Chapter 1, and this isn't to take anything away from the companies that hold these events, but ghost hunting can be really, really boring. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the paranormal. It's wildly unpredictable and you never know whether you're going to have a massively active night or a night where absolutely nothing happens. And on most cases it just feels like luck as to which way it's going to go on the evening you attend your ghost hunt. You should also be very prepared for the events company that you go with to use a lot of practical methods such as Ouija boards, dowsing rods and table tipping. And you don't need to join in on any of these activities if you think that you'll end up cursed or summoning a demon in some way. But the majority of public investigations, in my opinion, tend to lean more towards the practical methods. Some events companies will also have some of the ghost hunting gadgets, but these should only ever be used to try and reinforce what you're capturing via other methods, rather than taking them as absolute proof of the paranormal. You should also always be prepared to deal with other guests from all walks of life that could have very different of what is paranormal to yourself. And where the entirety of the paranormal field is based on belief, it's best to just be respectful of other people's beliefs no matter how much you actually agree with them or not. And a prime example of this is while we were on an investigation and using an EMF meter that seemed to be going off in response to some of our questions, myself and my partner Patsy, being the thorough investigators we are, started to try and rule out any natural EMF spikes that could be setting the K2 meter off. As we lifted a rug in the centre of the room we were in, we saw electrical tape on the floor beneath it, and when checking with the EMF meter, it turns out that this was the source of the EMF spikes. Some of the other guests actually seemed quite disappointed in this, with one of them actually turning to Patsy and saying, "You've ruined my daughter's night now." In another instance, we went to a very, very small venue where you can only have about 10 guests there, and 7 of the 10 guests on the investigation actually all knew each other and were from one group that was massively loud and disruptive, which put quite a damper on the evening, but we just had to sort of go with it rather than impact their investigation as well. The one thing you should always try and do on a ghost hunt is have fun though, and while ghost hunting should always be taken seriously, it should always be enjoyable. And as long as it's not impacting other guests' enjoyment of the evening, you should try and have as much fun as possible on a ghost hunt. Chapter 3: Equipment used. In this chapter, I'll go over some of the equipment you can expect to see on your first ghost hunt, as well as an explanation of how they work, because I know that events companies aren't always great at this. The first item is one of these that you probably recognise. It's a K2 meter, with some people believing that ghosts have the ability to affect electromagnetic fields and communicate via these devices. Be warned though, they're very prone to false positives, and almost everything gives off some form of electromagnetic radiation that these will pick up. The second item are light-up cat balls or cat toys, which function as motion sensors when moved. And while I'm not a fan of these, they are very widely used by paranormal events companies. Again, they're very prone to false positives and are quite unreliable when they choose to light up or not, often to the point that while one ball is continuously going off, when it's swapped out for another ball, this will totally stop from happening. And this may lead some people to tell you that you have disturbed the ghost that was playing with the ball, but that's probably quite likely not the case, and it is just a dodgy cat ball. They're also sometimes referred to as ghost balls, but don't be fooled, they're most certainly cat toys. Temperature detectors are seldomly used on ghost hunts and can sometimes give some good results when the temperature changes in correlation to other things happening. Be warned though that some events companies will try and claim that minor fluctuations are evidence of ghosts, but this isn't really the case, as temperature is something that is always fluctuating by fractions. So for instance, if you're watching a temperature gauge and it's going up by 0.3 to 0.4, this is perfectly natural and probably not proof of the paranormal. Spirit boxes are another item that doesn't come up very often, but it's good to have a knowledge of. And the idea is that they rapidly scan radio frequencies and that spirits can basically talk through the radio frequencies. And while there can be an element of audio pareidolia with spirit boxes, they can often yield some amazing results. The sound of them can be horrendous though. The last item you may come across is an ITC device, like an Ovulus or an Alice box. These are basically word banks where a word is selected at random and you're encouraged to ask questions in a hope of getting a fitting response. I personally have an Alice box and we've had some mind-blowing results with it. However, this could be us putting 2 and 2 together, and weirdly it took about a year to warm up to us before it started saying some really sort of profound things rather than the usual words like cat, devil and chair and stuff like that doesn't really relate to anything. Chapter 4: Final Tips. As some final notes on attending your first ghost hunt, be open-minded, but question and try and debunk everything you experience. Genuine paranormal activity is very, very rare, and be prepared to have a quiet night where not a lot of stuff happens whatsoever. Have as much fun as possible, and do not be afraid to have a joke with the staff or some of the other members of the public, as this will hopefully make the evening feel less dull for everyone involved if it's a quiet one. If you'd like a free piece of equipment to take with you, there's a phone app called GhostTube, which includes a word bank like I discussed in the previous chapter under the ITC devices. And while I personally don't give much credibility to phone apps, it could be a useful tool and something to keep the investigation going if it starts to drag on, and who knows, you may just capture something relevant on it. But that's this video done. Let me know about your first ghost hunt in the comments below, or if you're planning one. Watch this video next on my breakdown of the best paranormal locations. Bye. You can expect to see on your ghost first hunt.